The starship Eclipse drifted silently in the void, its engines dead and its hull scarred from a recent skirmish with pirates. Captain Zara Voss, a fierce and determined human woman, paced the dimly lit bridge, her boots echoing against the metal floor. Her crew was exhausted, and the ship was barely holding together. They needed a miracle, or at least a decent mechanic. "Any luck with the comms?" she barked at her communications officer, a young man named Jax. Jax shook his head, his face pale. "No, Captain. The pirates took out our long-range transmitter. We're stranded." Zara clenched her fists. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no way to call for help. She was about to order another round of repairs when the proximity alarm blared. "Captain, we've got an incoming vessel," Jax said, his voice tinged with both hope and fear. Zara rushed to the viewport. A small, sleek ship was approaching, its design unlike anything she'd seen before. It wasn't pirate, that much was clear. But was it friendly? "Open a channel," she ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered alien with deep blue skin and glowing amber eyes. His expression was calm, almost bored as he regarded her. "This is Captain Zara Voss of the Eclipse. Identify yourself." The alien tilted his head, his voice a deep rumble. "I am Kael of the Starforge. I detected your distress signal. Do you require assistance?" Zara hesitated. Trusting strangers was risky, but they had no other options. "Our engines are down and we've got hull breaches. Can you help?" Kael nodded. "I'll dock and assess the damage." Kael boarded the Eclipse with a toolkit slung over his shoulder. He moved with a quiet confidence, his sharp eyes scanning the ship's damaged systems. Zara watched him closely, her hand resting on the hilt of her plasma blade. She wasn't about to let her guard down, no matter how handsome or helpful he seemed. "You're not from around here," she said, breaking the silence. Kael glanced at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Neither are you, Captain. Humans are rare in this sector." "Lucky me," she muttered. "Can you fix my ship or not?" Kael knelt beside the damaged engine core, his hands moving swiftly as he examined the wiring. "Your plasma conduits are fried, and your power grid is unstable. But it's reparable." "How long?" 2 hours. Maybe 3. Zara raised an eyebrow. "That fast?" Kael shrugged. "I've had practice." As he worked, Zara found herself studying him. His movements were precise, almost graceful, and there was an air of quiet strength about him. She couldn't help but admire his skill and his looks. His blue skin shimmered faintly under the ship's lights, and his amber eyes glowed with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Stop it," she scolded herself. "He's just a mechanic." But as the hours passed, she found herself drawn to him. They talked as he worked, and she learned that Kael was a wanderer, a lone wolf who traveled the stars fixing ships and helping those in need. He had no allegiance to any faction, no homeworld to call his own. He was free, and that intrigued her. By the time Kael finished, the Eclipse was humming with life again. The engines roared to life, and the lights on the bridge brightened. Zara couldn't help but smile. "You're good," she admitted. Kael wiped his hands on a cloth and gave her a nod. "Just doing my job." She stepped closer, her eyes locking with his. "You saved my ship and my crew. I owe you." Kael's gaze softened. "You don't owe me anything, Captain." "Yes, I do," she said, her voice firm. "And I always pay my debts." Before he could respond, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was impulsive, reckless, and utterly thrilling. Kael froze for a moment, then kissed her back, his hands gripping her waist. When they finally pulled apart, Zara's heart was racing. "Stay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Join my crew. Be my mate." Kael stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said. "You're brave, skilled, and—" She hesitated, then grinned. "Let's just say you're not hard on the eyes." Kael chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met, Captain." "Is that a yes?" He hesitated, then nodded. For now. Over the next few weeks, Kael proved himself invaluable to the crew. His technical expertise kept the Eclipse running smoothly, and his combat skills came in handy during a few close calls with pirates. But it was his presence that Zara found most intoxicating. He was calm and steady, a counterbalance to her fiery temper. They made a good team, both on and off the bridge. One night, as they stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars streak by, Zara turned to him. "Why did you say yes?" she asked. "When I asked you to stay." Kael was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Because you remind me of what I've been missing," he said finally. "A purpose. A home." Zara smiled and took his hand. "You've got both now." But their newfound happiness was short-lived. The pirates who had attacked the Eclipse weren't done with them. They tracked the ship down, determined to finish what they'd started. This time they came in force, a fleet of heavily armed vessels. Zara stood on the bridge, her jaw clenched as she stared at the incoming ships. "We can't outrun them," she said. "And we can't outgun them." Kael stepped forward, his expression grim. "There's another way." "What?" He hesitated, then said, "I can rig the Eclipse's core to overload. It'll create a shockwave powerful enough to disable their ships." Zara's eyes widened. "That's suicide." "Not if we time it right," Kael said. "We'll eject in escape pods just before the explosion. They'll be too damaged to follow us." Zara shook her head. "It's too risky. Do you have a better idea?" He didn't. And so, with a heavy heart, she agreed. The plan worked mostly. The Eclipse's core exploded in a blinding flash of light, crippling the pirate fleet. But as Zara and Kael drifted in their escape pod, watching the debris float past, she realized something was wrong. Kael was slumped in his seat, his breathing shallow. A piece of shrapnel had pierced his side during the escape, and he was losing blood fast. "Hold on," Zara said, her voice trembling as she applied pressure to the wound. "We'll get help." Kael shook his head weakly. "It's too late for me." "Don't say that," she snapped, tears streaming down her face. "You're not dying on me, understand?" Kael reached up, his hand brushing her cheek. "You gave me a purpose," he said softly. "A home. That's more than I ever hoped for." "Kael, no." But his eyes closed, and his hand fell away. Zara refused to give up. She used the pod's emergency beacon to call for help, and a passing freighter picked them up. The medics worked tirelessly to save Kael, and after hours of surgery, they managed to stabilize him. When he finally woke, Zara was by his side. "You scared me," she said, her voice hoarse. Kael smiled weakly. "I told you I'd stay." She kissed him, her heart swelling with relief. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." In the end, the pirates were defeated, and the Eclipse was rebuilt, stronger than ever. Zara and Kael became legends, their story spreading across the stars. But for them, the greatest victory was finding each other. As they stood together on the bridge of their ship, Zara took Kael's hand. "You fixed my ship," she said. And now you're stuck with